One of the easiest and most affordable ways that you can add a bit of light to your subject is using a reflector. And of course, as the name suggests, you are reflecting light and then pushing it towards your subject. Now, when we talk about lighting, we've often likened lighting to water. What all we're saying is we're ricocheting that water onto the subject. And that way, you've almost got two light sources. In other words, if the sun was coming from behind me, I've got one hair light, backlight, rim light, whatever you want to call it, one light this way, and then it reflects off a reflector and comes back on me. So it's an easy way to add a second, third quality of light with just a reflector. Now, you may have seen them before. Often, if you do own one, you'll probably own a 5-in-1 reflector. One side is black, one side is white. If you unzip it, inverse it, one side is gold, one side is silver, and in the inside you have a translucent diffuser, which basically means that you've got light going through the reflector, but you can't see through it. Now let's look at the differences and let's see how we can identify them. Now here we have Rainy, actually, one of our good friends here. Basically Rainy is just in open shade. There is a direction of light, as you can basically see, and the direction of light's beautiful. As I've told you before, I turn the body away from the light source and turn the face back in. Now, when I add a white reflector to her, so I'm putting a white reflector, now she's turning her face back in, but you can see that the light is more contrasty. So the highlights on her face are more contrasty, it's brighter, and the actual shadows are a little bit deeper, because when you add that light source, then you're going to actually pay attention to the shadow a little bit more. So we've got no reflector, white reflector. Now let's look at the difference between a white reflector and a silver reflector. Now, why would I use one above the other? Well, let's discuss it. And again, if you've heard me say this in a previous segment, forgive me, but I think it's important in the context of our conversation. If you had water ricocheting off stainless steel, or water ricocheting from a white cardboard, for example, then what would ricochet more? Well, as you know, you probably wash your dishes every single day and every night. Water will bounce and deflect off. Reflect, deflect, I'm not sure the difference there, but whatever it is. It will basically bounce off the stainless steel and then bang, it'll spray further than it would, let's say, for example, a white plaster wall. So what I'm getting at is that if you already have an existing contrasty light, if we liken it to water, if you already have a high pressure hose, for example, let's say the sun's already bright and contrasty, okay? It's got a lot of water pressure, so to speak. It's going to bounce off and deflect. Now, if we have, let's say, a hazy sky or open shade, or clouds are covering up the sun, then we need more contrast. So what the silver reflector will do will give you more punch, more contrast. Can you use the sun with a silver reflector? Of course you can, if you want that very high fashion, very contrasty look. Now, with brides, you'll find that arguably the white reflector will be a lot softer, will be probably the one that you use the most with the sun. If you are, as I said before, if you're using in a cloudy situation, that's where the silver reflector will basically come in. Now let's look at the difference. We've got the white reflector over here, but you can sort of see now that the silver reflector has taken on the attributes of sunlight, because we're ricocheting that water, so to speak, off that stainless steel, off that silver reflector, bang, and then now we get that beautiful contrast. So I'm not saying one is better than the other. It really depends on what look you're trying to go for. So this is all about understanding, well, what attributes are going to be given to the subject. What am I trying to say? Is this a prettier look? Is it more of a high fashion look or feel that we're going for? It depends on what you want. Now, why would you use a gold reflector? You can basically see how obviously gold is going to give you a lot more warmth. I find personally a gold reflector on, say, Caucasian skin, in this case, it worked well. I think we balanced the light quite well, and of course the white balance that was in camera and the post-production, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, it's important to know that Caucasian skin with that gold reflector will sort of emulate golden hour. Now, we love golden hour. Golden hour is considered either the first hour, like of sunrise or sunset, and it takes on that beautiful quality of light. But sometimes on Caucasian skin, it can look a little bit like Oompa Loompas. It looks a little bit weird. I find when you have, say, African American skin, and then you've got beautiful light reflecting off a gold reflector, it saturates that beautiful golden skin and just looks beautiful and luxurious. So it just depends on what you like and what you prefer, but you see the difference. Silver, gold, you pick which one you want. Some would argue that this is too warm, some would argue that's not warm enough. You can go in between, you can do what you want, it's really personal taste. Now, let's compare, because some people say, well, what's the black side of the reflector? What's the black reflector for? Well, let's just get this straight here. Black does not reflect anything. It's not going to reflect anything unless there's some sheen to it or some kind of microfiber that's got something that's reflective or something, but black will cut away light. So from the original photograph that we had, that left-hand side, we've now got a black side of reflector, literally just here. So what it's doing is it's deepening those shadows, therefore making her look more contrasty than she was originally. How do I do that? Well, this is it. You simply put the black side of the reflector up and you're cutting away light. This was pretty much the position that we basically had for the other reflectors there as well. I just wanted to show you this because most people will not understand the black side. So let's show you some more examples of how we use a reflector. First of all, so this is my wife Melissa. She's not actually reflecting anything at the moment. So what I suggest that you do when you are reflecting light on a subject is do not start with the light on them, because you sort of want to see what it is without it first. So let me take away the light. So now she's just backlit. I want to see what the backlighting is doing. You see, if I was to put the reflector up, I might have turned her face and now the sunlight behind her is tickling her nose or her cheek and it's looking a little bit scrappy, it's looking a little bit dapply, which we don't basically want. So I get her backlit, make sure that there's no light in the front of her in this particular situation at the very least. Then we turn the reflector towards her. In this case, it was the silver side from memory. So you can see how she's almost blinded. So this will normally happen. So just know that anyone with a reflector on them, it does not feel good. This is, like I said, this is a small light source, being the sun, reflecting off the reflector and ricocheting back in, and water's going in the person's eyes and they can hardly see. You have to liken light to water to understand it, as we've discussed. In this case, we did it and I said, okay, I forget her name actually, to be honest, I just got a bit of a blank, but basically I may have said to her, hey, look at Melissa's hand. On the count of 3, she's closing her eyes. 1, 2, 3, and then bang, we get that beautiful shot. What have we done? Now, you've heard me say with lighting, turn the body away from the light and the face back in, or we turn the light away from the body and the face back in. So it's either one or the other, or a bit of both. So in this case, we've turned the body away from the light, or the light away from the body, in a way that gives us this beautiful texture, depth and dimension and form. And we've got a shadow on the cleavage, on her shoulder. We turn her face back into the light. We've now created the short side. She looks amazing. We've got some beautiful negative space. The quality of light and the backlight is beautiful with the sun, and the sun reflecting off the reflector, and we get a gorgeous shot. Can you use 2 reflectors? Well, yes, you can. If you had a couple of reflectors, you can do that too. In this case, we have 2 mini reflectors. One is the silver, a silver one, and one is the gold one. I'm not going to give you a prize to know which one is which. It's pretty obvious. The silver one is on the groom. The cool thing about a small reflector is that you can illuminate the face and not the body, and that's actually really cool. So in this case, you see that you don't really get a glow on him. There's open shade, so you get detail in the suit and the dress and everything like that. But I'm getting a mini reflector. I'm bringing it away from his face to where I just illuminate the side of his face that's closest to the camera. So bang, I've got it. I've got beautiful catch lights in the eyes, fantastic. And of course we've got the sunlight backlighting them, giving them a hair and rim light and edge light. And this way I've got the reflector on her, the gold side, the gold mini reflector, illuminating her. So I've got sort of that beautiful warm tone for that feminine energy and that cool tone for that masculine energy. So now it looks like we've got a couple of strobes on these guys, because it doesn't actually mathematically make sense. Well, if the light's coming on this way, you would broad light her here and this would be in shadow. But if you had 2 light sources above the sun, so the sun's giving us 2 more light sources off the reflectors, that's the way we're doing this. So it actually works really, really well. Now, does a reflector have to be Does a reflection of light have to be off an actual reflector that was made for that purpose? Well, no, of course, anything can be a reflector. It can be a shirt, it could be a wall. In this case, it was in fact a wall. So here we've got the sunlight hitting this white marble statue, giving us this beautiful soft direction of light. The light source is big. It was small, it was the sun. Don't think of the sun as, oh my God, it's massive. Well, it's massive if you go close to it, but it's so far away, it's so small, and it's very, very high pressure, so that sunlight is actually just beaming right on, giving us dense shadows. But I put them in the open shade, ricochet that sunlight off that wall, place them in a way that gets that beautiful soft light. And again, that's using a reflector. Well, here's another cool thing. So on this particular shoot, so we're in Venice, we're walking the streets, and if you've ever been to Venice, it's a beautiful location, it's a beautiful place, and you walk around these little alleyways, and I was just begging and hoping and praying that I would get a shaft of light in the middle of these two buildings, so I can see evidence of shadow on the left and the right. Not only did I find that sliver of light, so if you can imagine, there's an alleyway right here. Sunlight is coming right behind, giving us this beautiful glow. Then what happened was that these two buildings were adjoined by this little mini bridge, or another bedroom basically adjoining it, okay? Then what happened was that as I was walking through the alleyway, I got blinded by the sun. So I'm thinking, wait a second, if I get blinded by the sun and the sun's behind me, well, now I have two directions of light. In fact, I looked up at the actual building, and the sun was reflecting off a piece of glass. So sunlight, hair light, backlight, hitting the actual piece of glass, going back on them, and then I get this photograph. So you can see clearly that I've included the flare actually. I don't normally like flares, but I think it works in this case. The sun is between those buildings, giving us this beautiful strong hair light and rim light and edge light, hits the actual piece of glass, goes back on them, beautiful direction of light, beautiful negative space, and it gives us this beautiful strength about that photograph. And again, that's using a natural reflector in the environment. And as you've seen me discuss in previous segments, that you can also reflect off someone's face. In this case, the sun was hitting the back of them. I literally just had Eric a little bit closer to me. Now this was shot at about 1.8, so it's deliberately only her in focus, but the sun is reflecting off his cheek back on her. He gets that sort of strong masculine rim light, and she gets that soft reflection coming back on that. Because what's happening is, think of it like the sun is reflecting off a white sponge. It's soaking a little bit of that light, but then ricocheting and bouncing off her. So it's making the properties of that water, that light, softer once it deflects or reflects or ricochets. And that's how we get that particular look. Now, ultimately, guys, that many of us will use a reflector like this. The sun will hit behind the subject, we'll have the reflector in the foreground, and then we illuminate our subject. Great. That works well, but what about something not so obvious? If you look closely at the rim of his hat, it's actually white. So what if I could take a fuller length photograph and am able to use that light on his face, but without making it look like he's literally holding it up to reflect that light off his rim back on his face? It'd look a bit weird. So I need to give him an excuse. What excuse? Maybe he's about to put his hat on. So if we look at these behind the scenes shots, we've got the shot there on the left where he's just showing us the rim of the hat, and now he puts it up to his face. The sunlight hits the back of him, hair light, backlight, rim light, hits the actual rim of the hat back on his face, and then we get this beautiful glow, and it looks real. And that's the cool thing, is that now I have no problem in making artificial light or on-camera flash, off-camera look fake, as in there's evidence of flash. Now, typically though, I want flash or any kind of man-made light or light that I bring to the equation to not look man-made. Does that make any sense? Therefore, it looks more real. I get swept up in that moment. But I typically, though, it's really, really important to me that if I can, that's what I do, is that I'm trying to make it look natural rather than I've just got a glorified light there and that's basically it. In our next segment, I'm going to talk about reflectors a little bit more, but being more specific, I'm going to talk about the Omega Reflector 360, which is actually one of my inventions. Now it's been 4 or 5 years now in the making, but I can't wait to show you how versatile this tool can actually be.